Hi Chad, this is Kelvin. Looking at your swing, you've got a pretty good swing and it looks pretty nice and you got nice hand positions. But I think one of the things that might be really important for you is to kind of learn what the legs do. And I have not really written a lot about this, so maybe no one would really know what's going on because I'm sure no one else has really broken it down. But let me try to break this down for you. Here's Collins on the left. He's from the young pro from the PGA Tour. The first move, if you ever read anything about like what Sam Snead did, it's called doing a little bit of a squat. Now the squat is basically, we call this external rotation of the knees, where both knees should kind of come outward a little bit. Well, this angle it looks like it's straight, but basically both knees or both thigh bones are pointed outward like this for a little bit, and that stretches the muscles inside this groin area. And when you get to that point and you've done a little bit of a drop, okay, that's what's creating a certain first move, okay. Where I talked about it as a closed hip bump, but basically I think that closed hip bump is over exaggerated by virtually everyone, and so we don't get to this point where the left side can actually start to clear out a little quicker. So the first move, there should be some generation of rotation with the hip and the leg right here, okay. And yours looks like two things. One, it's a little bit of a slide of the hip. Two, you don't get to that squatted position. I don't see much of a drop. Okay, so your levels on the hip don't change too much, and then the kicker is the right knee. Okay, so if you look at this position, this leg is angled inward. Okay, and even this one is straight to a little bit angled inward. So if you look at it, that's the second phase. In other words, the second phase of the movement is where the power comes. So let's go back to Chad again. What the real second firing is when the thighs come together, right? This one fires this way, this one fires this way, and then that closes the gap, okay. And the knees come together, right, and that's creating rotation in the hips, okay. Now what you've got is the knees already together, which means it's sort of fired, but it didn't create a whole lot of rotation, okay. So you're basically left with first move, kick with the right, and then this is sort of fired inward. So what you end up with is, at impact, you're sort of now externally rotating the leg at the wrong time, because then we wanted to fire inwardly, and then all you've got is this slight slide forward. Okay, so your thigh still looks like this, rather than we want it backing up a little bit more inwardly, right, where the both thighs are coming together, instead of this is sort of the left sliding away from the right. At the end it looks like it's the same, but it's not quite, right? So great hands, you can see that right there. That's nice position at impact, and that's probably what will save you, because that really helps you. You can work on your body motions and not have to worry about the ball going really badly, because I think you can control things with your hands. So let's take a look at maybe another look at this leg movement. Chris, sorry, I think I might have called you Chad. I'm thinking of Chad Collins, the player that I was talking about. But anyway, here's Bubba from. I flip-flopped him to be right-handed, so it makes it easier for you to understand. But he's probably one of the most athletic guys on the tour. Again, not taking golf instruction maybe helps him, because he's not trained out of certain movements. But watch this front hip and the front leg as he makes this move to what I called externally rotate. This really creates rotation already, okay. So by doing that, he's also getting a little bit of a close slide. His foot is in a position where it's pushing the heel forward, but it's really as a result of him dropping and externally rotating on both sides. But you can see all that rotation. Then here's this sort of squatted position where you can see the thighs are pointed outwards, the knees are very far apart, and then basically this stretches the hamstring muscles which are behind and underneath. From the front view, you'd see them as almost turned inward, and then when they fire, the hamstrings, glutes, and even the quads on the front of your thigh here, they're going to start to create a straightening of the legs, but also a very powerful closing of the hips and a snapping rotation of the hip. Okay, so a lot of these guys, when they get to impact, they're moving so much with the hips. At the end, you don't see rotation because it's all done, and that's correct, right? Because you want to put all the energy rotation that you have into the golf swing before impact versus anything that you do after is pretty much just window dressing. So he's got all these movements in his body that we want to emulate in that lower body, right? Okay, so let's go take a look at your swing from the another side. All right, Chris, look at your posture in sort of a simplistic way. Can you see just how far your tailbone is really set back, and it puts the weight on your heels, and it makes it harder for you to sort of extend your body to rotate better. I know we're looking at iron shots, but basically if you were a little bit taller in your legs, you know, get your tush a little bit closer to the backs of the heels, and then you would see a little bit more of a rounded slouching this part of the upper thoracic spine and the cervical spine. You'd have more of a roundedness than looking so, you know, almost straight in this area. So posture wise, I think you could move better if you were in a better place. Now, having said that, that's not the biggest deal. We see people with that kind of posture all the time, and it doesn't really matter as long as the movement's good. So plane wise, you know, you may be a little you know, well trained in that area, but one of the things that I want you to see is how impact should occur with regards to the spine. So let's get this is McDowell, by the way. I'm sure you can recognize him, but let's just take a look at his spine, you know, when he's starting the downswing, and let's look at where yours is right here. Okay, now what's really interesting for the most part is that we've sort of focused on, you know, retaining a spine angle, and many people have said this: retain your spine angle, retain this sort of angle right here, and worrying about the tush staying in the same place. But what's really interesting is this is far more dynamic with the good guys than it is than you could ever imagine, I guess you could say. So look at this position of McDowell now. So instead of the red line, a lot of his back appears on the well, how about this? It's the lower spine has moved, it's shifted this way slightly. Okay, but what we're looking at on this side now is actually, you know, his left glute. And then of course everything that's on this side here is all of his left side that we can see. Now, can you see what you look like at impact? You practically look like you could be square with the shoulders slightly open on the hips, and this is nowhere near where McDowell is, right? I mean, he's got to be 60, 55, 60 degrees open on the hips, and his shoulders are relatively square. Now, that just tells you, right, how much lower body rotation he's getting. And you can see you do a little slow one starting there. I can see your hands moving a little faster than your hips, right? And then the legs kind of stop, and then you get your hands in the right spot and you hit the ball, and probably things are very well controlled. But see, it leads you to being a lot less powerful, and the ability to hit a ball longer and straighter would be warranted, right? And then in some ways it sort of is more manipulated in the hands to get things done right. which is not a bad thing. Again, you know, like you say, you're, as a two handicapper, that's great. Now, do you want to be a, you know, a scratch player +1 +2? You know, it's possible. I think it's possible. Just have a little more dynamic nature of your body motions. All right, so let's go take a look at from back view. All right, Christoph, from the back view, there's again the same thing that we saw a little bit from the front. Let's look at you first. Okay, we should see a drop at the start of the downswing. Okay, and it's not really dropping. In fact, if you look at real closely at this white stripe you got here, the bottom of it is starting to push up. Okay, so we don't have really a drop, and the drop is again essential for you to load the hip or the groin muscles so that they can fire. Here's JB Holmes from the back view. Okay, quite a bit of a drop. It looks like the left drops first, the right drops a little bit later. Okay, but basically it's there. The left side's really pulling in rotation already, and then he's got that squat move. So this is clearly dropped, you know, a good inch and a half or so, a little bit wider than that belt. Now once he gets there, watch this, maybe that middle belt loop. Let's try it. Okay, so all of this is gonna rotate backwards again in this direction, whereas I can't see this too well for you, but we know that because you're pushing with this right knee in this direction instead of rotating outward first, that then the only thing it's really doing is pushing all the time forward, so it tends to push, you know, the lower spine forward. Okay, so again, that's how you get in a position where you can't rotate. So at this point we would want to see a little bit more knees that are externally rotated in this position, and then from there close the gap so that this is not continuing to move in this direction. It should be back in this way. So let me give you one more video of that so you can kind of get a good clear picture of what's going on there. Okay, so here's Jamie Sedlowski, who's got, you know, again, exaggerated motions. Again, whenever I look at long drive guys, they're always got bigger, more extreme motions because they're trying to hit it far all the time. So it could be instructive because then we can see what the movements really are. So here we are starting the downswing. Okay, so that right leg, okay, it's in this position. The left leg, you can see, gets to this position, and then like I said, we're really loading up the internal the groin muscles. They're called adductors. We're loading all of that so that in the phase of really firing, what we're going to look for is, you know, the backward sacrum movement, and then also the knees, thighs pulling together to create rotation. Okay, so the great ones do this, right? Sam Snead, I think, was the first one that I've ever heard that did this kind of squat external rotation and then pull the knees in together. Ben Hogan a little less so, but he does it in a little different way. But this motion is in the great player's swing. So, you know, basically it's a drop, a squat, and feeling like the knees are externally rotating for a little while before they fire inwardly, and make sure that the hip is pulling on the knee to go forward, rather than a lot of people just fire the knee and push forward. There's a pretty big difference between those two.